There is a garden, there is a city, and there's a kingdom of God. And it is beautiful, and He is bringing it right now into our midst.
Welcome to Living Word Community Church on this Sunday morning. Very special welcome to all of you who are joining us by live stream Living Word online. And maybe this is the first time you've tuned in. A special welcome to you. You can find out a whole lot more about Living Word by visiting our website on a regular basis, checking out our church app, and I hope that you'll continue to join us for our series. Week number 2, we're going to be talking about the difficulty of growth. But before we dive into that, just want to give you a couple of quotes that I've been thinking about this week. 2 of them are old favorites of mine, and 2 of them are brand new. But this one is one of my favorites. On being asked why, at the age of 93, he still devoted 3 hours a day to practicing. Pablo Casal said, "I'm beginning to notice some improvement." Man, I just love that. At that age, still practicing so much because he's still seeing some improvements. Here's one from Carol Dweck, who wrote a book that is one of my favorite books on the whole subject of growth and learning. The book is called Mindset. And here's what she says about learning. If we're going to wind up being lifelong learners: love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes. Wow, is that ever hard? Enjoy effort, and keep on learning. Now, that's like a little bit of a summary of this really excellent book on growing and learning. I love those 4 particular things that Carol says. All right, here's kind of a new one for me, and this is from T.D. Jakes, who is a black pastor of an enormous church down in Texas. Man, this guy's ministry is amazing. He is a phenomenal communicator, and I love what he says. The world is a university, and everyone in it is a teacher. So make sure when you wake up in the morning, you go to school. Man, what a great way to approach life and every single day. The world is our university, and everybody you meet and everything you're going to go through, it's just an opportunity for learning. So man, wake up and go to school. What a great way to approach life. And then here's the last one from Elon Musk, who is like a technology entrepreneur. He is a CEO. He is a founder. He is like the chief guy for SpaceX. And well, listen to this. Patience is a virtue, and I'm learning patience. It's a tough lesson. Man, he is so right on. This guy who has reached the pinnacle of work in the business world, of influence, he's still in the business of learning virtues of character. One of those is patience, and it's a tough lesson. Well, we're going to pick up from something we talked to you guys about last week. So last week there was one really big idea that we wanted you to really grab hold of. It comes from Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, and the translation, the message, and very simply, God is at work in all of us, and God has started this really good work. He is at some point going to bring it to a flourishing finish. I really want you to understand that there's this flourishing finish that God has in store for all of us. That's why we are growing and learning and developing and maturing. We are heading toward a flourishing finish, but we're not there yet. We're only on our way. We're on the journey. We're in process. The flourishing finish is still to come, and frankly, it's not going to be easy getting there. It's going to take some really hard work. And so therefore, I think we need, let me just call it a reality check about this thing called growth. We need a reality check about this thing called development. We need a reality check about maturity. We need to make sure we understand what all is involved in this thing called lifelong learning and growing if we're going to wind up actually fully moving into what this is all about. 3 things I want you to come away with today. Number 1 is growing is hard, and I'm going to explain to you why growing is hard. Then we're going to talk about there's something inside of us that makes growing even harder. And then the last thing we're going to spend a little bit of time with is there is a hard place. There's a challenging season where God will particularly use that to grow us. So growing is hard. There's something inside of us that makes it even harder. And then there are certain seasons that those seasons are very, very hard, and God does something very powerful. We're going to look at each one of those, and let's just get started with the theme that growing is hard. Now, what I found really interesting, and I've known this for many, many years, but Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, we read about Jesus. Although he was a son, Jesus, learned obedience through what he suffered. I mean, Jesus had to go through some hard times, some challenges, some difficulties, and as he went through those things, he actually wound up learning obedience. That's pretty striking. If Jesus, the Son of God, had to go through some really difficult times for learning, well then how can you and I expect that we won't have to go through those things? And so therefore, I have this particular phrase that I've used for a long time. A lot of people around here are now using it. If you're through any of our spiritual formation courses and leadership development courses, you're going to hear this phrase, but all real learning and growing. It is long, it is slow, it is deep, difficult, and it's particular. It's long. It doesn't happen in an instant. It's slow. It's not fast. It's deep, not just taking place at those shallow surface levels. It's difficult. It's not easy. And when I say it's particular, even though there are common patterns that are involved in so much of our growth, for every single one of us, God has a custom-made journey of growing that he takes each one of us through. Everything's always very, very particular. Long, slow, deep, difficult, and particular. That's the very nature of learning. It's the nature of growth. Really, I think it's the nature of all good things. It's really the way life has been designed. In John chapter 16, verse 33, Jesus reminds us, in this world you'll have troubles. Right? Just troubles are not to be unexpected. Troubles are just part of what it means to be alive. But in this world you'll have troubles. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Now, it doesn't mean he's eliminated the troubles. He just meant that as we are going through these troubles, he has overcome them. And in Jesus, we too wind up overcoming the troubles. Last week, I showed you guys an image. Man, this image resonates with me immensely. It's inspiring, it's motivating, it's full of hope. And that is, this is the flourishing finish that God has in mind when he looks at our lives. I mean, he sees us from these really little tiny beginnings as a little acorn that doesn't seem like it has very much to suddenly becoming this magnificent, majestic tree. I mean, it's just vast in its scope and its size. That's the flourishing finish that God has for us. And like I said, that's so motivating, inspiring. That's what Brian Rice is one day going to be by God's grace. But I know that not everybody resonated with that image. I mean, that image was not hopeful for everybody. In fact, there are some people that when you saw that image, you had some sadness because you don't think that is remotely possible for you. You have a different image of your life. You've been through some really tough things, and you just kind of see yourself as this tree that's been knocked down long ago. I mean, we all go through troubles. There are storms of life for all of us, and for some of you, those storms have just rained on the parade called your life. For some of us, there are these Category 5 hurricane storms that come rushing through our lives, and they just leave devastation in its wake. And some of you guys have had those hurricane Category 5 storms going through life, and you sort of think, man, this is what's happened to me. This is where I am. This is what it's like. And how can I ever have this when life has done this to me? Well, I want to show you a couple of images of how Jesus can overcome even Category 5 troubles and storms. Even when we think we've been knocked down, in Jesus we're not knocked out. I want you to pay real close attention to each one of these images. So look at this. This is a tree that it has been knocked down. And yet look at the life that is growing from it, because somehow it is still rooted into the soil that it needs to have all that life. It's knocked down and it is still flourishing, right? Look at this one. In a forest, somehow this tree fell over, but it managed to remain rooted, and it's setting up like another whole forest of trees from it. It's amazing. You would have looked at that thing when it was first knocked down. It's done. It's over. And look at the flourishing. But here's my favorite. Look at this thing. This is in some farmer's field, and if you could get a closer look, you could see that here's, at some point in the past, some big storm came along and knocked down that tree, and a lot of its roots are exposed, but there's still a whole lot of roots underground. And look at that. It's just amazing with this vitality and energy, even though the tree has been knocked down. I mean, that's the power of God. Even when we are knocked down and we think it's over, I can't recover, I'm never going to be able to learn and grow and develop, and this flourishing finish, oh, maybe it's for other people, but not for me. Oh, no. The flourishing finish is for everyone, even if we think we've been knocked down, because with Jesus Christ, knocked down is one thing, knocked out is something entirely different. And so, Now, I just want to have that as a little bit of encouragement for you. Growth is hard. It takes work. It takes effort. It requires energy. There needs to be some passion, some enthusiasm, some investment, some commitments. That's just the nature of life. It's the nature of learning. It's the nature of growing. It takes effort. With a bit of work, you can be nicely average in just about anything you want to do. With a bit of work, you can be nicely average. With a little bit of work, you can be nicely below average. Doesn't take much to be below average. It just takes a little bit of work. For example, like Bernard Tomic found out this past week as he was in the first round match of the Wimbledon tennis tournament. Bernard lost the tournament, lost his first round, the match. He lost it in about an hour's time. He lost it because he really didn't care about it. He was out there, he was lackluster, he was lazy, he just stood there and watched balls go by. There was no effort, he was complacent, he just didn't care. All he did was a little bit of work, and he was very nicely below average. So if you are even a loser in the first round of Wimbledon, you get $56,100 for just being there and losing. But the organizers of Wimbledon were so disgusted by just a little bit of work Tomic did that they literally fined him his entire prize money. He was happy just doing a little bit of work, but nobody else was. If you want to be good, it takes more than a little bit of work. It takes a good bit of work. If you want to be very good, it takes quite a bit of work. And if you want to go even beyond that, it's going to take a lot of work sustained over time. Good and very good is going to take quite a bit of work. Good learning is going to take a pretty significant investment of your part. So let me tell you a little bit about part of my past, which probably most of you don't know. When I was in high school and college, I was really into the sport of water skiing. And I had a little bit of an advantage. My mom and dad had a cabin, a bungalow down in the Susquehanna River. Spent my summers, started actually when I was in middle school, started growing up on the river. We spent so much of our summer down there. And Dad said, "Hey, you guys want to learn to water ski?" And I sure did. Loved the water ski. And we did all kinds of water skiing. We did trick skiing. We did jumping. We did other stuff. But slalom skiing was my favorite. And what slalom skiing is a boat is running down on a straight line, and they're going down through a series of buoys, so just running a straight line. But then on either side, out there a ways, there's a buoy, and then there's a buoy, and then there's a buoy, and there's a whole series of buoys that are spaced apart, and you have to cross them. And so you start here in the middle, and when you're heading for the first buoy, you quickly zoom out there, and you have to go around it, and then you have to zoom back across the wake into the whole other side. And so you just do that back and forth, and if you're pretty good, you're having to lean in, and you're just throwing up these wonderful, wonderful sprays. And what happens is the better you get, the faster the boat starts to go, which makes it even harder. And the better you get, then they start to shorten the length of the rope, which makes it even harder, because then you don't have it as it's just you have to work that much harder to get to where the buoy is and to zoom back. But I skied all the time. I mean, mornings, afternoons, evenings, whenever we could, we'd be out there on the river practicing water skiing. And I got to be pretty good. Man, there were some mornings and some evenings when wind died down and the Susquehanna, it was smooth as glass. It was spectacular. We could hardly wait to get out there. And when you're throwing up those sprays from cutting those corners, it was amazing. I actually got pretty good. Now, by the way, that's not me. I mean, this was decades ago, and I don't have any decent photos. But I was that good, but I was never that good. Oh, my word, this guy is amazing. And I don't know if you can see, and I can see the intensity. He is like literally laying down on the water. He is having to dig in so hard to accelerate because the boat's going fast, and he has the shortest regulation for the rope that can be. And he is actually zooming faster than 75 miles an hour across the water from one buoy to the next. And so when he is zooming at 75 miles an hour, suddenly he has to stop on the dime and accelerate as hard as he can going back. It is amazing. These guys actually have 4, 5, or 6 G's of gravity slamming against them as they're doing this kind of stuff. I was never that good. because that would have taken even more work, more wipeouts than I cared to have, more pain, more tired muscles, more my dad's gas money. And to be honest, to be that good, I would have had to relocate down to Florida where we would have had a much longer skiing season. But I didn't need to be that good. I was happy being good enough. I was content with being good enough, and I just so enjoyed watching the people who were outstanding. But that's just an example of putting in hard work and time and making a commitment and going through some pains. And by the way, isn't that true for most of us? I mean, most of you guys. We all have sports we pursued, hobbies, personal interests, and we make investments, and we work at getting better at those things so we can enjoy them to a certain degree. I mean, I've had all kinds of things over the years I've put a fair amount of time into getting half decent at. And we just kind of understand that's how life works. You know, even with the fun, pleasurable things, we have to put some work in them if we're going to wind up maybe getting pretty good. We just can't do a little bit and enjoy them the way we'd like to. And why don't we think that way then about the more important stuff of life, about relationships, about friendships, about marriage, about parenting, about work, about career, about vocation, about digging into something that is rich and full of purpose and meaning. I mean, all of those things, which are far more important than our hobbies and our sports and our personal pastimes, I mean, these things require just as much hard work if we're really going to wind up becoming good and pretty good at those things. You know, with just a little bit of work, I can nicely be a below average husband. With just a little bit of work, I can easily have a below average marriage. With just a little bit of work. With just a little bit of work, I can be a below average dad. With just a little bit of work, I can be a below average friend. With just a little bit of work, I can be a below average pastor. With just a little bit of work, I can be a below average boss. Or with just a little bit of work, you can be a below average in anything with just a little bit of work. But why would we want to be below average? And so therefore, why would we do just a little bit of work to be below average when we want more than that? I don't talk to anybody. I mean, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, Pastor Brian, I'm so looking forward to being below average. I don't even hear people say, man, I'm thrilled to be average. I don't even hear those kinds of things. We all want more. We all want to be good. We'd all like to be pretty good. We'd all like to, in some things, be very good. And here's what's more significant is the important people in our lives, they would like us to be more than below average. The people whose lives we're constantly interacting with, the people whose lives we are constantly shaping, and who we are affects who they are, and what we do affects what they do. I mean, those people who matter so much, they need us to be more than below average or average. They need us to be better than that. And how about God, who has a flourishing finish in mind for all of us? God doesn't want you to settle for being below average. God has so much more in store for you than to just say, I'm okay being below average in my relationship with God. And so therefore, if we want more than below average, we've got to put in some of the work and effort and time and energy and a little bit of suffering, pay some of the cost, a little blood, sweat, and tears. Fall down, we fail, we get up, we learn, we improve, we adjust, we move on. That's what's involved if you want more than being below average. And so therefore, last week, as Pastor Brian Newman and I began to talk, we mentioned a number of these things that you're going to want to need as the motivation to be pretty good at this thing called growing. You're going to need a vision of what it looks like if you're pretty good, if you have a pretty good marriage, if you have a pretty good job, if you have and then you need to be highly intentional, and you're probably going to need some help along the way. As the different individuals in our video right before the message, as they were talking, especially Lucas, said, man, I got to get some people in my life to help me with some of this stuff, and we need to make wise choices, and effort and energy and investment. All that is needed if we're going to wind up really moving into the kind of growth, learning, developing processes that are going to help us get to places where we really would love to be. Pretty good places. All right, that's the first reality check. We just have to understand that anything good is going to require some effort. Growing and learning, which are some of the best things you can do, they're going to require some hard work. Here's the second dynamic. Not only is growing hard, but there's something inside of us that makes it even harder. There's something that's gone wrong inside of us that makes this thing called growing even harder. We've all got issues. We've all got stuff. We've all got some junk. We've all got some past. We've all got some history. We've all got some baggage that we're carrying around that makes growth harder than it should be. Look at this. I think you can probably see these. I mean, here's some of the baggage that we carry. Now, by the way, because remember that word particular, because we're all different, we don't all carry the same baggage and we don't all carry the exact same degree. And there's a whole bunch of things that we could even add that you might have that aren't even up here. But look at a couple of these things. I mean, most of us, we carry around some degree of guilt. We're all dealing with expectations we have of others meeting our needs and performing and doing things in certain ways. My word, people dealing with shame. Some people have the victim mentality, woe is me, and we move into these blame games, insecurities. Oh my word, when I talk with people who have insecurities, and so that leads them to have trust issues, and lack of commitment is growing in our culture, maybe even an inability to make commitments. And I mean, the stuff that we have inside, it's there. And all of that works against us having the kind of life that we want, but it also works against us even moving into really healthy patterns of growth and learning. And so for some of us, when we're thinking about growing and maturing and developing through life, it's almost like we're carrying the weight of these massive amounts of baggage, this stuff that's weighing us down. So here's what's really significant, and I really want you to catch this point. Some of the most important learning you will ever do will be doing something about the stuff that is in your life, doing something about those issues that we just looked at. Paying attention to these particular dynamics, dealing with these things in healthy, growing ways will be some of the most significant learning that you will ever do. And then there is our relationship with God. There's this thing called Christianity that we are really interested in. We're trying to figure out what is Christianity all about. And really all you have to do is be a follower of Jesus for just a little bit of time, and you realize that not only is life itself hard and challenging, but Christianity, being in a relationship with God, well, that's challenging as well. I mean, think about Christianity. It says these ridiculous things like love your enemies. That's hard. Forgive people who have hurt you. That's pretty difficult to do. Deny yourself. Man, our culture doesn't help us with that. This weird, strange, take up a cross and follow me instruction. I mean, somehow it means embrace a life of some difficulty and suffering and sacrifice for the sake of others. That doesn't sound very easy. Living by faith. Being a person of integrity in a world that maybe doesn't even value integrity any longer. Being a servant. Being generous with our resources. I mean, I could give you another dozen things. I mean, the standard raw material, what it means to be a Christian, none of those things are very easy, and yet that's part of what our life with God is all about. But then, all the stuff that we bring to other relationships, we bring these same things into our relationship with God, and we bring a whole lot more. In fact, there's a lot of words up here that the Bible uses that aren't here, but we bring this thing called badness and fallenness. We bring evil. We bring sin. We bring some really junky things into this relationship with God. That's just part of the baggage. That's part of the stuff that we bring into this relationship with God. And so therefore, bringing all of that stuff into a relationship with God, that makes that relationship even harder. And so therefore, if that's the stuff we're bringing into the relationship with God, it becomes crucial to know what's the stuff that Jesus is bringing into a relationship. And here's the stuff that Jesus brings into a relationship to counteract the stuff that we bring. He brings the stuff of grace. And isn't that a beautiful image? the roots of the tree. We're just talking about trees, and we're talking about being deeply rooted, deep roots and wide life. But, the roots are the roots of grace. We're rooted in grace, and that's the stuff Jesus brings. He brings the stuff of love and mercy and strength and compassion and wisdom. He brings the stuff of fresh starts and second chances and new beginnings. He brings light and life and energy and joy and shalom and hope. That's all the stuff that Jesus brings into our relationship. And when the beauty of the stuff of Jesus collides with the brokenness of our stuff, then in that collision, there's an explosion of forgiveness. There's an explosion of renewal. There's an explosion of transformation that begins to take place as the stuff of Jesus impacts the stuff that we bring. And that's why Living Word is here. We're here to help you be okay bringing all of your stuff into the relationship with Jesus. And we're here to help you encounter Jesus, who's bringing all his stuff into your life. That's why we're here. And it's a process that is long, slow, deep, difficult, and always so particular and personal. But we are here to help you guys day after day as the seasons go by. And that leads to the final thing I want to talk about. We talked about growth itself is hard, and the stuff inside of us makes growth even harder. But then there are these hard places that God is going to use to grow us. And in the language of the Bible, it's simply called the wilderness or the desert. Now, for those individuals, it was usually a real wilderness. It was usually an actual desert. For you and I, it's rarely going to be a real wilderness, but this is going to be like a metaphor or a symbol of just you and I moving into a really difficult season of life. You and I moving into a time when life gets really, really painful and hard. And we don't voluntarily go into wildernesses. When I was in my main wilderness, I didn't voluntarily go looking for that thing. I didn't go dancing into a wilderness because I wanted to go there. What happens is we sometimes just wake up and realize, oh my, I'm in a wilderness. How did that happen? But what often happens is, well, stuff has fallen apart in our lives. A broken marriage, a failed marriage. A kid does something really, really bad and just brings heartache into the whole family. Maybe get fired from a job. That people go into wildernesses because of that. Sometimes there's moral failure and one that you can't kind of keep quiet and secret and hidden. It just becomes known to different people, and there's all kinds of things that go on with that exposure. Sometimes you go into wilderness because there's a crisis, maybe a crisis of sickness, a health crisis, a really bad diagnosis. Sometimes it's because somebody we love has a diagnosis, and there's death and loss, but all kinds of things are the launch of a wilderness. But here's what happens. In those very hard times, God winds up being able to spiritually and strategically use those to get our attention and to do stuff that he's been wanting to do for all along. All that stuff of grace and love and mercy and strength that he's been wanting to do it, but we've been in a bit of a resistance mode. But now that we're in this place called the wilderness, now we begin to move into a place of, oh, God, if you don't work in my life, I'm not going to get through this. And we become more responsive and more cooperative. I had my own wilderness experience. It lasted for years. Like I mentioned, I didn't go into it because I wanted to. But I got there because there's just junk going on in my life. I was a below average leader. I was a below average pastor. I was a below average boss. I was a below average friend. I don't think I was a below average husband, but I was just maybe average. But there's just so many things I wasn't doing very well, and there was the baggage that I brought in. I had my insecurities, and I had my pettiness, and I had my jealousy, and I had my control issues and power issues. There's all kinds of stuff that was out of whack in my life, and it had been hurting people, and I was keeping me from helping people, and I went into the wilderness, and I didn't know what was going to happen in the wilderness. I didn't know if I was going to stay in the wilderness. I didn't know if I wanted God to do anything in the wilderness. But by God's grace, that wilderness became the transformative experience of my life. I've got a friend who she's well acquainted with the wilderness experience. She's been in a wilderness season for years and years. Part of her wilderness is she lives in a part of the planet Earth that's just a really difficult place to live, a very difficult place to live. And she was a single woman living there. That was really, really hard. And she dealt with loneliness, and she dealt with isolation, and she dealt with being the minority. She dealt with being the outsider, and she dealt with issues of workaholism. I had some of those issues as well. I mean, she so wanted to make a difference, and she had almost a sense of, well, I've got to fix these people. I've got to save these people. And if it's not for me, then nothing good is going to happen. And she was constantly dealing with disappointments because no matter how hard she worked, things weren't working out the way she wanted. She would work and things wouldn't improve and people wouldn't get helped. And eventually she got married, a great time, and she had children. But she found that sometimes even with that, when you're lonely inside, you can be in a relationship and you can still be lonely. And she discovered that. And she had a miscarriage along the way, and that was full of pain. And that made it even fuller of pain because that was sort of like symbolic of what had been going on with her work in this hard place for many, many years. It seemed like things would start, but then they would die before they had come to fruition. And she went through a pretty extended wilderness season. But here's what the wilderness does. It's a place where we meet God. It's a place where we encounter God. It's a place where all the broken stuff, we now start to maybe let go of it a little more. And so therefore the stuff of Jesus begins to explode, that junk, and we begin to be transformed and become different people. You know, whether this is your life or whether this is more your life, in the end it doesn't matter. God's going to get you to a good place. Now, yeah, it'll be hard. You're going to have to work. And yes, there's going to be stuff in you that just has to be exposed and healed and broken and changed and transformed. And yes, God's going to use some hard times, but He's going to get you there. And that's what we want you to have a really amazing, strong hope for in this season of growth that God is beginning to launch. He is going to take you to a flourishing finish.